I call the planning and zoning.
The other one.
Gavel.
Have a gavel. Okay, I call this planning and zoning board meeting to order for September 17, 2024. Welcome to everyone here, and everybody joining us online. We do have a quorum, even though we're missing some board members tonight. We do have a minimum of 4, we'll make our quorum. I just want to add a reminder, start off with a little reminder this morning, this afternoon, this evening, regarding the duty to vote. And this is coming from our rules and procedures. It is the duty of each member to vote unless excused by a majority vote of the board, as in the instance of conflict of interest or other legitimate reasons. When any board member has a direct or indirect affiliation on matters coming before the Planning and Zoning Board, the board members will not be able to cast a vote in the affirmative or the negative on said matters, or participate in any communication, verbally, written, or electronically. And a direct or indirect affiliation is considered to be, but not limited to, an employer, a developer, a builder, business partner, real estate broker, loan company, or immediate family members. And that is section 16 of our rules and procedures, just as a reminder. So with that, everybody has a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes necessary to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Okay. It has been motioned and seconded that we adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the agenda is adopted. So there are no special presentations this evening, public comments. No one signed up to comment, so there's no one to comment. All right, so we will move to the consent agenda, which of course consists of the minutes from our last meeting of August 20, 2024. Are there any amendments necessary, corrections necessary to the minutes from August 2024?
So mine was just, I can't remember if, I know that at one point I did vote against approving, recommending it to the town council. Was that the last meeting?
I don't think were you here last week?
The minutes say it was.
She was here, but I thought it was unanimous.
That's what I thought as well.
Or
Okay, so there must have been something previously?
correct. Yes, so
Okay.
there was, I think it was the McKinley case in which you didn't.
It was
McKinley, so that was the
Yes.
August meeting.
Thank you.
So our minutes are good, no corrections? Yes. Okay. All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Okay. We have a motion and to approve the consent agenda that has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And therefore, the consent agenda is approved and adopted. There is no old business, there is no new business. On to staff updates and information. Turn it over to Michelle.
Yes. Good evening. So we are going to just review the process for zoning map amendments and zoning text amendments, and I'll be tag teaming this with Zach. So he'll do the later portion. So I'll start out with the zoning map amendment. So the state grants local jurisdictions the ability to regulate development in their community. And this is done through the process of zoning. So every piece of property within Harrisburg has a certain zoning classification. Additionally, even properties that are in the town's ETJ area have a zoning designation. So with that, all different zoning classifications identify certain performance standards, a list of the uses that are available, some that are allowed by right, some by special use permit, or some with limitations. So there's various types of zoning districts. On the screen, that is the town's zoning map. You'll see that the solid colors are what we would call a conventional zoning classification. So they vary from residential to institutional to commercial, or even light industrial, or EC, or employment center designation represents the town's industrial classification. So there are what we call a conventional zoning district. Just follow the rules in the ordinance, the uses, and you can just develop under the base district. Then we have conditional zoning districts. Now those are cross-hatched on the screen. So view that as a custom zoning classification. Just as it sounds, conditional zoning district allows the ability to place conditions on the proposal. We'll go into detail further. Then there are what we call overlay zoning districts. They can vary. So an overlay zoning district could be, we have a, tied to a special plan, like a town center plan or small area plan, that we have a special plan for 49 corridor plan. We may do a special overlay zone on that. So when somebody proposes a project along that corridor, we can say, okay, your base zoning fits, but you also fall underneath this overlay zone. So there are various types. They differ in all jurisdictions. So there are multiple types of districts. So I like to start out with a who, what, when, why, just as a quick overview. So what is a zoning map amendment? So this is any time you're changing the zoning classification on a property from one classification to another. Why is this done? Well, sometimes it's because somebody is proposing a use that is not allowed in the current zoning designation. Or they may have an old residential zone on 49 and that is better suited for commercial type of designation. The town sometimes will do zoning amendments on properties because they want to facilitate and attract a certain type of development. So there might be some property along 49 that we think is better suited for economic development, like a light industrial park. So the town may do a rezoning to change that to help gain interest from that sector of the economy. Annexations, they're typically a rezoning, a zoning map amendment that accompanies an annexation. That's when somebody is requesting to bring their property into the town. So we'll be changing the classification from county designation to town designation. Now, the only time that doesn't apply is if you're doing an annexation and it's within the town's ETJ. So that's because any property in the town's ETJ area already is subject to the town's zoning classification. So occasionally that will happen. It's very rare, but that can happen. And then sometimes you can get conditional zonings tied to an actual development proposal. So who can initiate them? Always think property owner. So the town can propose a rezone of certain properties, but there are special laws if the town is proposing to downzone a property, reduce density, that would be sort of taking a development opportunity away. So we always have to involve the property owners. So even when Taylor Morrison or another developer's here representing a zoning map amendment, the application's always signed by the property owner. So they have to be tied to that type of application. So when for map amendments process, again, they're typically tied to some other kind of action by the property owner. Annexation, the town is updating their zoning ordinance and map. There was a big zoning, we changed our zoning map when we updated the UDO because we actually changed certain zoning classifications. We took away the rule like I1, I2, which was an industrial district, and put just an EC. So that was a big process. So types of zoning map amendments, well, typically there are two. There's the conventional approach, where again, we're looking at just a straight base zone, or even an overlay. If we're proposing an overlay zone through a conventional approach, no conditions can be placed on it. Or we do a conditional zoning map amendment, and I'll go into details of those in just a minute. So whether you're going a conventional rezone or a conditional rezone, there are some things that are consistent as it relates to process. So the process of amending a zoning map, being rezoned on a particular property, is a legislative act. So it goes to the planning board for recommendation, town council for a decision. Ex parte communications are fine. So if somebody's proposing to rezone their property, and they meet you, they want to have coffee with you, talk to you about their project, they talk with council members about the project, they are open to do so. The only time that there should be some hesitation is if there's a conflict of interest, and you went over some of that.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect timing. So if there's a conflict of interest, then you would certainly need to declare it at the beginning of a case. The board would actually vote to agree to your conflict of interest, so you could recuse yourself from voting on the issue. So that's the legislative process. Now, again, with both conventional or conditional zoning, we have to follow the required findings for approval that are laid out for us in the state statutes. So there are basically two required findings for zoning map amendment. One is consistency or inconsistency with our comprehensive land use plan, or in this case, our HALA, the Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan. So say I was proposing a commercial in an area in the future land use plan says it's identified for residential. You can still make a recommendation to support that. You just have to justify in your findings why you think it's more appropriate. So just because something is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, your Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan, doesn't mean that you have to recommend denial. That's still a judgment based on your presentation and your other findings on whether or not you want to support that. So what it does is it ultimately the town council approves something that's inconsistent with the comprehensive land use plan or our HALA, it automatically updates it right then and there based on state law. So if changing that to a commercial designation, say it's on 49, and you just really thought it was going to be more like office over that area, but we think it's more of an economic driver, we want to approve a general commercial classification. Well, so inconsistent with the land use plan, but you justified why you think it better suits the community, and if it gets approved, then we go amend the future land use plan to reflect that decision that's been made by the policy makers in the town. So it is possible. So that's one finding, consistency or inconsistency with the HALA. The other is the request you need to find that it's in the public interest. It's a reasonable request and in the public interest. Now, with that, these are considerations that within the state law that you're supposed to be thinking about when you're making that finding. So you should consider the location, physical size of the property, what's around it, impacts to adjacent property owner, relationships, the development being proposed, again, is in the public interest, and so forth. So what's unique about Harrisburg's UDO is, I always wondered why this was in there. All of our zoning map amendments, we have all of this criteria statements within the UDO. And I was like, where did all that come from? Why is it like that? Well, once I started studying it, it's really supporting these findings. So when you're making it reasonable, you're making a finding that it's a reasonable request in the public interest. Each one of the criteria that is outlined in the staff report is helping to justify, not justify, what's being proposed. So it's supposed to be helping to support the recommendation planning staff to the board. You can agree with it, not agree with it, change it, but it all ends up into public record to help support that finding. So again, zoning map amendment, 2 required findings, consistency with the HALA, and is it a reasonable request in the public interest? So this is something they changed a few years ago in state law as well. So we, as a habit, make these findings separately. Or no, we approve and then we make these findings together. But you could actually, the state law says that you could recommend approval, finding that's a reasonable request and consistent with the land use plan in one motion if you want to. And it used to be they had to be separated. So some people still keep them separated. You make a decision and you make the findings. It's whatever the board wants to do. So we just have to be in the habit of following that process. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference of a conventional zoning district and conditional. So conventional, we don't really do a lot of them here in Harrisburg. A lot of jurisdictions don't do a lot of them, and it actually, I think, benefits the community and the developer when you do a conditional zone. But I'll start with the conventional. So conventional, I come in, I don't really know what I want to do on my property. All I know is I want to rezone it to a commercial designation, such as general commercial, and because it allows the most uses by right that I think would be good for my property. So when you do conventional rezoning, every use in the use table under that classification is fair game. So what that means is the board, when someone comes up and proposes a conventional rezone, a conventional district like general commercial. I don't have a site plan. I don't have anything. I don't know what I want to do. I just want to rezone it. It's your job to evaluate the location and all the possible uses, and really that's the right fit at that location. So if the applicant comes up and says, no, I'm going to do a grocery store there, there's no way to condition that. It's a conventional rezone. They would be allowed every use in that table. So it's up to the board to consider it that way. They can show you a pretty picture and say, this is what it's going to look like. You cannot consider that in part of your decision maker. A conventional zoning has no conditions. They can sell the property the next day and somebody can decide to do a convenience store there or something different. So there's nothing to lock in a particular use. So when you're evaluating that, we would present to you as one of the attachments, the zoning district table, where you can see all the possible uses. So that covers that. So in conventional zoning, though, there's still, although there's no conditions, just remember, a development, when it does come in on that property, still has to comply with all of the requirements and development regulations of the town. So if it still requires a traffic analysis, it would still do that. If it requires a tree survey, tree preservation, it would still do that. It just would not be something that would come to this board for any consideration. So that flow chart, it's kind of hard to read, but that's just the basic process. So every proposed rezone, and this one's a conventional, when it starts out with the pre-application, we usually look at the land use plan and say, well, are they in the ballpark? Do they have a good chance? If so, we'll let them start going through the process. If I want to do industrial or in a residential area that's planned in our future land use plan, we would say, yeah, no, we're not interested. They would just go with, they can still apply, but if they can't get past the pre-application meeting with any support, it's highly unlikely that they return. So we get the pre-application, then if it's in the ballpark or can be considered, it goes to, they apply, they go to the planning board for recommendation, town council's the decision maker. It is a public hearing. Town council can approve, disapprove the process, and then from that point on, unless it requires a special use permit for a particular use, everything's done at staff level. Never see it again. So that's what we call a conventional zone. Conditional zoning district. So I think that this is my favorite type of process in project 2, 3, and 4. I really like working on conditional zoning districts because you're basically going to consider it a custom zoning district. Now, really, they have to identify a base zone that's already allowed in our ordinance, but they have to attach a site plan to it. So it still might have some uses that only are allowed by special use permit, but if they select that use as it goes through conditional zoning, it can go through one process. So what they can't do is say, I want a conditional zoning and I'm going to propose a use that's not allowed in the base zone, that's illegal. They can't do that. So it has to be use already allowed in the base zone. They're just trying to site plan to it. So site plan is a requirement. We've done a couple of these. We can place conditions. They still have to meet the minimum requirements, but we can also condition above and beyond what the ordinance says as well. We do require residential, well, actually all development that goes through conditional zoning. Well, we always ask for architectural renderings, whether it's commercial or single family. We get their traffic study up front, overall site plan. This process can actually take, on a nice sized development, a year to 2 years in processing. So these aren't easy to go through. Yeah, so I think this board has already done 2, right? McKinley and Traymore. Yes, and Traymore was approved by town council at its last meeting as well. So again, board considerations. We've already talked about conditions. Now they have to be reasonable. State law says they have to be reasonable and something that we have the authority to condition. So we can't condition impact fees because that's illegal in North Carolina. So there are certain things that we cannot condition, but the law would have to specifically say you don't have that authority. They have to be incorporated in an approval documents, and they have to be consented to by the developer. So if the developers, that's why usually in our presentation, we talk about the developer has agreed to these conditions. We actually have to get their signature. Once a decision's made, we have to get a signature on a document with the conditions of approval. Let's see, we have these, uses may be limited to those proposed. So the beauty of a conditional zoning is you can also limit the uses. We have a couple of commercial centers where we specifically eliminated the ability to do gas stations or drive-through facilities and so forth. So I think we've only recently just seen some single-family residential developments, but they're always specific on the density, the type of product, although the zone may allow townhomes in there, if they're coming forth proposing that zone with single-family detached lots, we're gonna limit it to single-family detached units as well. So all the expectations and considerations are known up front. So again, I have to say, I really like conditional zoning because it provides a level of predictability from the adjacent property owners. They know what's coming. The town knows what kind of investments are coming, what kind of development's coming, and the developer knows it's predictable. They were entitled, these certain number of lots with this type of product and this quality, and they understand the market change. That's just the way it stands. So it works all the way around. So one other thing the state law says about conditional zonings is that it's related to amendments. So state law says that minor modifications can be done on an administrative level, but it's very limited. In our ordinance, it's limited to changes of design or lots by 10%. You can't go up, but you can't shift a road too far. If you have to redesign all of the roadways in there, you're gonna have to start all over. So there is a little wiggle room as it relates to modifying the site plans, but it is very limited. So McKinley was a good example. So remember, it was approved originally for 162 single-family residential lots, and they had to go and start all over. And they wanted to reduce the lots to 60 lots, that well exceeding the 10%. So what they went through is they started from scratch. They had to have a pre-application meeting and so forth. So this is the process for conditional zoning. It is very much like the conventional zoning process. The only areas where it differs is there's a required neighborhood meeting. And that is done early on before it even goes to the planning board. In fact, actually before they formally apply for the zoning map amendment. So the intent is they get early exposure, and staff is there as well, to hear what the concerns are from the neighboring property owners regarding this, any proposed development. So that works out well. So they can decide at that point, do they really want to apply and go forth with the investment of the plans, or is it better that they pull it out at that time? So this is just a table that sort of compares the process. As you can see through the table, everything's very much alike. Conditional zoning has a few more checks there, neighborhood meeting, site plan. We can place conditions of approval. Again, development predictability, I think, is one of the best tools for a community to ensure that we're keeping with our vision for the town. So that's all I have on zoning map amendments. I did want to point out to you, I have some documents here for you. Some is directly out of state law. Back in 2021, the state changed its regulations, and there's they put everything under 160D, and this is a pretty good document about reading into the details of plan consistency, reasonableness statements, so that's all I have. So, do you have any questions about rezones? So do we have to do a rezone for property in the ETJ? The answer's already done, isn't it? Yes, it could be a maybe,
Okay.
because it already has so property in the ETJ already has its own classification, but it could be a classification that somebody wants to increase the density or change from like residential to commercial. So the answer maybe, but.
Trick question.
Yes, yeah, it's a trick question. All right, so that's all I have for you. If you have any questions for me, I'm glad to answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to our peers later to talk about
Images of that.
next minute.
Tag team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good reading material.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I missed the first half. We had a little development meeting. It was a little longer. I'm going to talk about text amendments. And by text amendments, well, let's get into what we mean by that. So text amendments are a legislative process. I mentioned this before. I think I said to some of you that the ordinance is law. It's land use law, right? It is a guidebook as much as any other codified regulation law is. In this case, it regulates land use in the town. So planning and zoning board role can either involve initiating preparation or amendments to this is the land use plan. So we're going to talk about the UDO, but you also can recommend changes to the land use plan. And that's something that you all haven't really gotten into very much, but we're going to be updating the land use plan, and we'll be talking a lot more about that. And then also, which we'll focus mostly on tonight, is to either initiate, to hear, review, make recommendations to the town council on applications for text amendments to the UDO. So by state law, any change to the ordinance has got to go through the planning and zoning board, and there has to be a recommendation to the council. You all can recommend approval, and the council can deny it. You could recommend denial, and they can approve it, or you may just sit on it, and then if you don't make a recommendation, they can do what they want. But there is, so there's a process, and at this point, most of you are relatively new and haven't been on the board for a while, but it does happen over my career. Shelley, I'm sure could echo this, that planning boards do make recommendations. They see things and they say, you know what, we think that this is an area that needs to change. Could staff look into it? We look into it, we come up with a proposal, we pitch it. You say we like this, and there's a recommendation on to the council. Of course, town council ultimately is the one that's going to approve either a land use plan, a change, or amendment. They also can initiate amendments. So that's not something that happens a lot. It usually is something that is generated either at staff level or we're doing an update to the plan. But town council can say, you know what, we want a text amendment. Actually, we had that last year. I shouldn't say that doesn't happen very often, happen with the vape and smoke shops, where we amended the ordinance. But even if they initiate the ordinance or the text change, it would have to be referred to you. And then you would make a recommendation back to council, and then they would make a decision. Of course, we're involved in all of this, and you know, there are, and we'll look at this a little bit more closely, what goes on. So text amendments obviously officially changed the UDO, just like any law is changed, we would change the UDO. Criteria that you would follow is to consider, and you do this for conditional zoning as well, common decision criteria. So there are a number of considerations that cover land use, that cover transportation, that cover compatibility, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at an amendment and you would consider, you know, all the different possible impacts. Ordinance also, potentially there may be an error. We're looking at that right now. We have discovered some errors in the UDO. Bill, I'm surprised you haven't been here last year, but there are errors in the UDO. Matter of fact, I found quite a few. So if there's an error, we obviously want, or changing conditions. We'll talk a little bit more about what those might be. But things change. The population, 2020 census population for Harrisburg was 18,900. We're over 23,000 now. With that change comes land use change. So conditions change, zoning changes. Just point this out, and this is really the same as a conditional zoning or zoning map amendment. Somebody comes in and it's denied text amendment for whatever reason. The text amendment cannot be considered for another year. Now, in most cases, and Shelley, I don't know what your experience has been on that, but if a developer has a text amendment that they would like to see, what they will usually do, that always happens, is they will come and meet with us and say, this is what we would like to see, and they would much rather hand it off to us and say, well, you bring this through the process. And if we think it's a good idea, then we would. If we don't think it's a good idea, then we say, you're on your own. But if there's a no, unless there's a significant, substantial change, as there would be for a rezoning. If a rezoning is denied, and someone's got to come back in within a year, it has to be a major change. It can't just bring the same thing back in. So it goes for text amendments as well. This is an interesting provision. So let's say there's a violation and somebody wants to pass a text amendment which essentially will legalize what they're doing. You can't do that. Now, there are, and you may have heard, or maybe not, heard of a non-conforming use. So non-conforming use essentially is a use that is typically predates zoning. So it was built maybe 30, 40 years ago, and today you couldn't build it. And so it's considered to be legal, but it's non-conforming. So there could be a text amendment which may make something that was legally non-conforming at some point conforming. That's a possibility, but you can't cure a violation, and people have tried to do that over. So I got to give credit to Shelley, who, what, where, when, why. I added the where, just for the record, so if the where doesn't work, it's my fault. What's text amendment? Request to amend the text, the UDO, pretty simple. It could be uses allowed. I'll give you a great example. In Kannapolis, for those who have been to the stadium, the new stadium downtown, there was not a allowed use of a stadium in the downtown. So we had to change the ordinance. There was also a height problem. We had to change the height issue. There was some signage issues. We had to change that. So, it could be that you have to go through and make some changes. Dimensional regulations also can change. Everything from, as I mentioned, building height to setbacks, structures, to sizes of parking spaces. It used to be the standard parking space was 10 by 20. Now you have a menu. If you have compact cars, you can do 8.5 by 17. If you have a midsize, you can, and you really can. You can kind of customize it. So those can change. Performance standards, everything from the lighting to landscaping to parking to I mentioned landscaping, but anything really that would be either contribute to the use or the layout of that use or would improve it. So there are lots of things that you could change. One of the things that we're looking at for the ordinance, of course, is the sustainability. If you make certain changes that say, this is not a suggestion, this is a requirement, that, now you have to do this. There are a lot of different things that you could. Who can initiate? I already touched on that. We can initiate it. We can come up with a great idea and say, hey, this is what we have come up with. What do you think? Town board, town council. I'm sorry, that should be you all. Planning and zoning, town council, and again, usually they're not going to sit down and write it. They will say to us, please put something together. Food truck is a good example. That was a process that we went through. They wanted to see something. Citizens had this happen where somebody comes in and they say, here's an idea. I'll give you a great example. And it was kind of a hybrid because this person, well, I think at the time they weren't on the board. They wanted to see in the town these, got a couple different names known by, but I'll call it cottage development. Essentially, we have small homes that front on a common open space green. And so they pitched it, and I said, well, that's interesting. And I had left Kannapolis, but as part of the final plan, they now have a cottage development plan. So that was, something that some citizens came up with. Anytime a text amendment can be processed, it's not once a year, it's not, after the election, although probably we don't want to get too close to the election for certain amendments. And, you'd like to put more than just one together unless there's a real pressing need or demand. We're about to, get into an update of the UDO, and we're going to cover a lot of different areas. So it will be a comprehensive omnibus code rewrite. There'll be a lot of different pieces. Some are going to be dealing with tree save, others will be dealing with screening, height, maybe uses that we would allow in certain districts, maybe a different district. So that is a possibility. Why is it proposed? Change in state law. This can happen, 160D, which Shelley mentioned. If state legislature changes something and our ordinance is at odds with it, we need to change our ordinance because our authority comes from the state. And so we have to make a change. There could be federal, and usually at the federal level, it's to be a Supreme Court decision. So there was a big Supreme Court decision about signage, and so everybody changed their sign ordinance. So there's different problems with implementation. We just can't, this is not working, we've got to change it. It is something that would seem like a good idea, but like anything, once you start to implement it, it's not working. and so we may have to change things. Development proposals, I've already mentioned, the example of Kannapolis, but there are others. When we get into the town center redevelopment plan, I'm almost certain we're gonna have to make some changes. What those will be, I don't know, but having gone through this in Kannapolis, it's probably gonna involve some uses, it's probably gonna involve some height, it's probably gonna involve some screening, it's gonna involve materials, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll go through that when we get to it. Changes in the community values, interests, and needs. This usually starts at the comp plan stage, which is really the vision, and the vision gets translated into the ordinance. So that is going to be, I think, a driver of a lot of it. Organizational changes, you get a whole new council elected, and they say, we want to change this completely. So tear it up, rewrite it. And that could be anything from the uses to screening to parking, and it could involve anything in the ordinance. Changes in technology. Back when I was starting out, I remember doing a study report of video game parlors, pinball machines. So that was a big problem back in the day, right? It was like River City, capital P, the song that starts with and all that. Things have changed. So now we have video game. We have all the online, and that was a huge issue a few years ago. As everybody's scurrying around to get their ordinances changed so that people didn't come into your city and make all didn't turn your city or your town into a gambling haven for people coming in. So technology can change things. RV, or I should say EV, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, which I think are a little further out. All of that good stuff may require that we make some changes because we didn't envision it. Back in the 1920s, when the first ordinance was written, they weren't really thinking about speed limits and parking ratios and screening, et cetera, et cetera. As time went on, those became more of a thing. So where's the text amendment process? Well, it starts out right here with you all, and it moves on to the town council. There are times they can send it back to you, and you can send it back up, and that did happen with the food truck. Town council is where that change is ultimately going to be approved. And usually it's effective upon passage, but like annexation, they can say this is effective this day. Any legislation like this, say it's January 1. Now, state, when they redid, it was 160D involved some new elements, but it was recodifying a lot, cleaning up a lot. But some of what was in there had a date a couple of years down the line. One of those was that if you have zoning, you have to have a comprehensive plan. And so all the little communities, 1,000 people, 1,200 people, 1,500 people were scurrying around because they had zoning, but unless they had a comp plan, they can't keep their zoning. So it was the Full Employment Act for planning consultants who could then put those comp plans together, and then they could keep their zoning ordinance. Talk a little bit about the text amendments, but it could be everything from small to a medium to a rewrite of the whole ordinance. Obviously, once you rewrite it, hopefully you're not having to make major changes. But like anything, when you adopt a new regulation, when you start driving it, you may find out that it doesn't drive the way you want it to. And so you can always make the change. So in terms of how you develop text amendments, we always start with the state law 160D because everything has to line up with that. And if it doesn't line up with that, then some smart attorney will sue us, and we will have to change our ordinance, or we may be slapped with a judgment. We don't want that to happen. We always look at other jurisdictions. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. So we borrow from other. I mentioned the zoning regulations that were first adopted in 1920. It's interesting. If you look at those, there were state zoning enabling acts. There were also city zoning enabling acts. And if you look at those regulations, they really, the foundation framework is still in place now. Obviously, a lot's changed in the last 100 years, but the framework is still there. So we always look at other jurisdictions, and if they have something that makes sense, no reason to reinvent the wheel. We get calls from people, we call people, and so there is this back and forth. Obviously, we have to make sure that the regulations work. And so, there are times where we may do a little test run to see if it does work, or we may have an opportunity to run by our development community or our engineer community landscape and see, is this going to work or not. Implementation, zoning ordinances are law, so we have got to make sure it lines up with state statutes. And so that's why most consultants that write ordinances have lawyers on their staff or as part of their team. And of course, we have our lawyer that has to look at it. So it's got to pass the legal test. We've been doing this for a while. So there are things that we have seen in other communities where we've worked that we think would be good here. And so we'll, at times bring something in from elsewhere. Consult professionals. We in North Carolina really have a wonderful resource, School of Government. Some of you have done courses through that. I think all of you ultimately will do courses through that. It is a fantastic resource where they have experts. And if we have a question, I will email one of their attorneys and say, hey, what about this? And they will give me, it's a free answer. So it's good to have. But we will, we will ask the question to make sure that we're staying out of trouble. Other town departments, especially when we get into the engineering aspect, we always make sure that anything that has to do with engineering, drainage, road construction, et cetera, we're going to run by them and make sure that it makes sense. So an amendment can always impact other requirements, so it's the ripple effect. One thing that we have found is that if you make a change in one place, it probably is going to impact. So when you redo your regulations, you really do need to start at the beginning and take that all the way through the end. And one of the nice things about our ordinance now is you can search and you can find things pretty easily. So that makes it, when we're trying to do some research, we're able to find what needs to, what change we might need in. So, Shelley laid out the process for the zoning map amendment. Text amendment is similar. The difference obviously is that it is not a development, and a text amendment doesn't authorize a development. It's simply changing the rules that then would guide whatever the development is. So once the text amendment's initiated, we'll go through the draft process. You all would review it. We would have legal public hearing, legal notice, go to town council, ultimately decision is made. And so the process is, again, legislative starts with you, goes to the town council. You do need to make findings, whether it is for a zoning map amendment, a conditional rezoning, same thing with a text amendment. Is it consistent with the land use plan? Is it in the public interest? So there's the reasonableness. Now, I wasn't here the first time, I know Shelley mentioned this, but she may have, you can do a consistency statement that says it's not consistent with the plan, but we still think it's a good idea. And one of the reasons you might do that is, what I mentioned earlier, things change. A land use plan that was drafted 6 years ago, which is what we have right now, may be a little bit out of date. And so it may be that it makes sense now. And if you make that kind of a judgment, it probably means that it's time to update your land use plan. Because, it's not lining up with, or your ordinance is not lining up with your land use plan, or it doesn't make sense. And it can be initiated by town council, planning and zoning, citizens, that it can come from anywhere, but whoever it comes from, it's got to go through you all first. You make a recommendation, and it goes to the council, and there it will either be approved, or it will be denied, or it can be changed. Right? They may say, yeah, we love this except for this one section, and just like a conditional rezoning, they can change it, and it would be it would become then part of the ordinance. So that is the text amendment quick run through. Any questions, Shelley can answer them, and I will I'll answer any questions. But there is a lot to absorb, but the bottom line is that when we look at our ordinance and we think there's an issue or there's a problem, we're going to bring something to you. We're not just going to allow it to continue. And I'll just say one last thing. Shelley talked about the zoning map amendment and how that could either be associated with a development project or not. Decision could be made that, what, industrial zoning over there, that really doesn't make sense. We need to change that to mixed use. So, that could be a decision that's made. And so that kind of decision is probably going to require some change to your land use plan. So it's kind of a back and forth. But the point I wanted to make is this, and you see this in a lot of older communities that are transitioning, old main streets, which town had 1,200 people, and there were all the old homes. And Belmont's a great example of this on the street. Well, the town grows by 10, 15,000 people. Nobody wants a single-family home on the main street. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to allow for transition from single-family residential to some sort of commercial. Maybe it's commercial down, residential up. It may just be office. But the market dictates a lot of what we ultimately will bring to you because, we come up with all kinds of great ideas, but if we say, yeah, we want to zone this, this particular zone, and it makes no sense, and the land is not going to develop, then it really is not to the public's interest. So anyway, that's.
So as we wrap this up, I wanted to show you where a lot of our zoning information can be found. We actually have an interactive zoning map. So if you go under our department to planning and zoning, and where are we? We're here somewhere. Okay. So under planning and zoning, we want to go to
There you go, on the right.
UDO.
Yep.
So you come to this page, if you simply click on this, this takes you to the town's UDO. Then up here, we have maps. It's new. interactive GIS. So this is really nice. So here is the town's zoning map, and this is hosted by the town. So you could get zoning from the county as well, but this is the town's own zoning map. So here's the corresponding designations. What's nice about this is you can turn on layers and off layers. So for example, I turned on conditional districts. If you wanted to turn off the zoning, let me go here, turn off the zoning. So I'm looking at a particular property and I see what the zoning is. Now I want to look at the future land use. Here is that information. So if I'm looking to buy a property or see the highest and best use of my property, I can see if what I want to propose for a map amendment would be consistent with the Harrisburg future land use plan. So we use this map actually on a daily basis. We get phone calls from either developer or property owners. So again, there's our zoning regulations. It also has layers. I like the environmental layers because then you can zoom in and see if I'm buying a piece of property. And this goes down to a parcel level. See, here we go. So if someone's saying, oh, I'll give you a good price on this property, I'm going to bring it up and say, oh, yeah, I have floodway, floodplain. There's really just a small portion that may be developable. So this is a great resource. If you ever just are looking, want to look at your own property, you can type in an address up here and it will take you specifically to that property. And share this with people besides using it yourself. Again, this is the basis for all our development in town is to utilize this information. There's other layers that show like the schools, the school district, the fire districts, and so forth, fire station, parks. So there's a lot of information on here that can easily be accessed. So I just want to show you where that is, and that's it.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Shelley. Any questions for Zach or Shelley?
Not related to the presentations, but I do have some questions that I forgot to email. So we were talking at last month's meeting, is there a way that the board can get minutes from the DRC meetings or supporting documents, or just so we kind of know what's coming into town, what people are proposing, and what the town is commenting on?
Well, that's really a staff level documentation. So sometimes we're talking about projects before they even apply, so that could be information that may not want to be released, get people excited about something that may be coming or may not be coming.
I think just about anything that we're gonna be voting on, not like that,
Okay.
just things.
So the DRC minutes will be very technical in nature. And I guess my question is, what is it you're looking? It may be a simple, we got to send them a comment letter to revise their plans.
For me, and actually, one other
Okay.
I would recommend, for me,
Sure.
it's just to feel the heartbeat of this town, how you guys set your heart, your mindset, how you guys work. I see, when projects come, because from early stage, from DRC to the time you're ready to present it to us, a lot has happened.
Yes.
I don't know how you guys work, and I would like to be better informed in how this town functions, how it manages development. I think that makes me a better educated person on this board. If it's stuff you do, and I understand your point, it's too soon, it's way too soon, it's gonna get turned upside down, it's gonna be quite a bit
That's
different.
correct.
But they may come to DRC again with a very updated thing, see what the town's doing here, they wanted this, I've just learned something where our town's directing us going forward. If you don't think it's right, we just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
If it's something you think is inappropriate, okay, we understand.
Well, let me talk with the DRC team on that and management, and I can get back to that. Because again, it would be like the inner workings of any company when you are having board meetings and deciding stuff, not everything is.
I think I was
put
the
out
other
there.
board member who was wanting this because at the last meeting, like I did have questions about, well, what did the sheriff say? What did the fire department say?
Okay,
What did,
right.
like, so I think I had some of those questions.
Right.
And you had explained at the last meeting that, yeah, you guys already checked that.
Yes.
But I think I was still like wanting to know, well, what was discussed? What
So do you
questions
want to
were-
see the actual comments, the comment letters? So that's what I'm trying to figure out, what you want. So every project is vetted by all departments before it's presented to the board. Now, we can do it in a manner of ensuring that the staff report has sections from the fire department, the police department, and
Well, even like water engineering for like water drainage, I mean, that's a big concern for a lot of Harrisburg residents and new development. I mean, all the posts I see of Middleton, they're still getting flooded. And it's only gonna get worse with, God, that Shamrock, that's gonna get developed and with, anyway, I think it just, and I thought it was important to know what is being asked of those other town departments and what questions are being asked and how are they being answered.
Okay. All right.
I'll just weigh in real quick on that. So, and Shelley touched on it, one of the things that we want to do, or what we want to do, is to give you as much information as possible. And so, we have talked about, frankly, redoing our staff report, making it a little more streamlined. So essentially, we would have a cover page, which is almost an executive summary, and then we would have backup, behind that. Just like you all are relatively new, and the board is, just kind of gelling together, we're going to add 2 people in 2 weeks. So we have been operating at a really, at a level where we have not been able to do the things we want to do. So having said that, I think, and this is probably a good agenda item for discussion, but we can talk topical areas. So we say transportation, environmental impact, fire service, school, we can make sure we cover all of those issues, and that way and we're gonna, it's not that we have to go into the notes because we'll be able to say, this was the conclusion or the of the DRC, but we can give you the information that really is relevant for decision making.
And make sure the appropriate department signs off on that section in our staff report, because again, we can do a plan review on something that DRC may see it 10 times because that's how much work, how it evolved there. But again, everything as it comes before you in a conditional zoning, it's still very high level. So, and what I mean by that is, and I know Bill works for a local jurisdiction and you review construction plans. So when we're doing rezoning plans, they are not a construction plan level. So there won't be stormwater calcs and the fine tuning of projects to that level. Everything's okay. Is it generally compliance? Is it, they will have to do stormwater calculations to be approved by a town engineer, but that's not done at that high level. So again, every time we do a staff report, we do require a traffic study, which is an in-depth analysis. We make sure that it's in compliance with the UDO. Fire department reviews it, and a standard comment from the fire department is they'll look at something, okay, you need so many entrances and so forth, but their detailed comments will come at the point of construction plan. So that's when you get down into the very specifics. So again, we can talk high level, have topics, and make sure we get that information from the departments to you, but some of that real detailed information won't happen until construction plan phase. But we'll give you an example, and I think that you're right, that would make a great discussion is, we both have worked at many different jurisdictions, and the staff reports here are very different than what I'm used to. We were more topic driven. We had environmental, we had stormwater, we had traffic, and we broke it down that way. So what we might do is talk about it, give you some examples, and then you guys can help us fine tune it.
Anything coming to where we need to make a decision.
Yes.
Right, like not everything, like.
Essentially, I mentioned, I didn't talk to Monica or Bill about this before, but I would love to have you all have essentially a template at your space where we're covering things, so you know these are the things that we're gonna go through. One of the things that we have, and this is one thing that pet peeve, we've talked about this, in our current UDO, there are 2 sections that address criteria, common decision criteria, and then specific criteria. We gotta change that. You can't have 2 sets of criteria, we need 1 set of criteria. So that is that is one of the changes we have to make. But, all of the different things, you all should know, okay, here's the menu. We're gonna talk about traffic, and we're gonna cover that, parking, landscape, environmental impact, water, sewer, drain, whatever it might be. And again, we may not, get into, how many cubic feet per second and so forth, but we are gonna give you at least to know that, yes, drainage analysis has been done, and this has passed our drainage, our standard for whatever it might be. So that, I think that's really where we need to be heading.
So you all will consider coming up with some templates to present
Yeah.
to us to review?
But, yeah, we can put that in a future meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, to give you a template, show you some examples and.
Especially now, just from an educational standpoint, just you having those staff reports and knowing what questions are being asked and how they're being answered. So we can help in the future as well. I love it.
Know what questions to ask. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
And number one, neighborhood meetings, can we get on the email list for those?
Sure.
Because, if my social media feed don't send it to me, I don't know it happened. It'd be nice to know it all.
Yeah. And that's why we include the minutes in the packets as well, so every zoning,
I know,
Yeah.
it makes a difference to hear the people, yeah, for sure.
I think it goes a long way if we go to a couple of those.
Yeah.
That we were there.
and they are offered virtually as well, so if you're in transit, you can still tune in as well.
They should really post it to the website so anybody could attend them.
Yeah, we record the neighborhood meetings and they are all on our website. So if you happen to miss one and you want to hear it yourself, or somebody called you and say, hey, you should have been at the meeting last night, you can always go back and we record them there on the website.
But those are on the town calendar, neighborhood meetings are not, seems like it used to be.
Yes, it's recurring.
So just, don't be selling any land in the dark blue, please.
That was the only 2 I had.
Okay,
And I
so
the email and I dropped the ball, it's not email. So I want to catch it a month later.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question about process, because you mentioned that the board can bring or can request, I guess, text amendments or something to be looked at. So I guess it was 2 meetings ago with Trade War 2, and there was all that discussion about trees and clearance. And then one of the things that was mentioned is that, technically it was a above and beyond thing, right? That was agreed to. And then it was mentioned that it would be great if we could continue going forward so that it's all, consistent. Is that something that we as a board does that have to be like an agenda item that we discuss? Could we discuss it and then say we'd like you to look at it? Is that something that would come sooner because you're already doing some of that,
Yeah,
it
and
is
well,
part of that process.
yeah, and landscape's probably gonna be one of the biggest, I should say, tree save and impact, berms, all that kind of good stuff. So I think we've already heard it, but when we put the draft section together, we're gonna give it to you. And we'll do it section by section. We're not gonna give you the whole 300, 400 page, but let's just deal with this. So, yeah, and, you know, as we go through it, we may trigger something else and say, well, what about this? So, what I've done at this point is I literally have read it from cover to cover. And I've got my first analysis of what it is. And so then Shelley's gonna look at it. And then we're gonna get a consultant in here and they're gonna look at it. And then we're gonna come to you and say, this is what we have discovered, and this is how we're, you know, proposing. And that will be the process we're gonna go through to get things in shape and updated.
We are tracking some of the conditions that we're placing on the conditional zoning, such as ensuring our roadway cross sections all have at least 6 feet, if not 8 feet, landscape area for the street trees. We've already done some background research on it. So we are compiling a lot of the conditions as we move forward, and they'll be incorporated within the UDO.
Great point, right. So we have this standard like 5, 6 conditions. Well, what I mentioned earlier, well, let's just put them in the ordinance. Because ultimately what we would, the goal, the nirvana for planners is that the ordinance would have all the guidance you would need so that it's almost paint by number. Now,
Yeah.
most of the development that is happening is residential and it involves a conditional rezoning. So we don't have that ability at this point. But for example, the town center, we are going to be making some changes so that someone can very quickly come in and build consistent with the plan that we come up with without a whole lot of needing to go through any boards or commit, and say, here it is, here's the standard, get in here, build it, and you know, we'll be able to move through pretty quickly. So, yeah, that's another, I think,
Are you
important.
is there gonna be input from the community on that?
Absolutely, oh yeah. Shelley and I have been doing this a long time, and we've talked about this before. I'm a big community input person, because I would rather hear your complaints at the front end than at the back end when I'm trying to say to the council, we have community support. And somebody stands up and says, wait a minute, I don't support this. So absolutely, we want to get it all out as much as we can. So, yeah, absolutely. And you all are going to hear you're getting the first
Okay.
bite of the apple.
So there's always the ability for boards, whether it's the Board of Adjustment or the Planning and Zoning Board, to send a memo up to the town council on requested modifications as well. So that way, because again, they ultimately decide on their policymakers, decision makers. So for example, if a Board of Adjustment keeps hearing a variance on the same section of the ordinance, you know, they may generate a memo to the town council saying, you know, we'd like the town to consider amending this section to allow more flexibility, because this is what we're seeing. And this board has that same ability. Again, we're tracking some of the changes and conditions that we're applying as a standard, but if this board if there's a topic you think we're not covering or ordinance, or you just see something, you can always send a memo up to the town council. And that's how a lot of text amendments actually start, whether it's this board or residents may want something changes in the code, and they'll take their 3 minutes at the town council saying, I really think the town should consider amending its regulations to allow this, or to do this. We're seeing this difficulty out there. And the town council then directs town manager and staff, okay, we want you to research it and write it, or no, we're not interested. So then we get direction on it. So usually if we get an amendment request, even if a resident comes in and say, oh, I want you to change this, we recommend they go talk to council because we get our direction through the organization, right?
Sorry.
If there was something that this board wanted to change, we just, maybe add it to the agenda, discuss it, and then vote on it.
Yeah, and then
Approve it, and then just, come up
send
with
something up to
council.
council.
To suggest.
There was one other thing that Bill brought up at last month's meeting, and it was kind of, annexing in property that is not adjacent to current town property. And so is that something, we've got pockets of the town of Harrisburg surrounded by Mercer County
Right.
jurisdiction, and, the word is escaping me right now.
Non-contiguous.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's something
Yeah,
how that works, we can discuss. it.
so-
Like, is it something that we can,
let me give you a quick answer. Ultimately, the council's gonna decide whether they want to annex or not. The key driver in that decision is usually, can we serve that area? Right, whether it's water sewer, whether it's police, whether it's fire, that's a big, and also, what is the value of what we're annexing? Does it make sense? I will tell you also, and I think we've shown this before, but if not, we can make sure you get a hold of it. We have annexation agreements with Concord, Midland, Charlotte, which shows the area that we potentially could annex. And some of that, so the point I wanted to make is, it would be nice if we could grow a concentric pattern out from the middle, but it's not always that neat and easy. But certainly, we're not going to be going outside of our area to annex. And so the big picture policy issue from the council standpoint is they're going to look at this map and say, okay, this is within our area. Yeah, it's over here, it's within, now they may say, yeah, it's within our area, but right now, we don't want to serve that, whether it's a traffic issue or whether it's a, water sewer, whatever it might be. But, that's kind of the way it's looked at. So there's a few different things that are factored in.
Another challenge that I had, so when it comes to sewer, Wausau has the interceptor lines. So the larger sewer lines are managed by the county. We, municipalities in the area, bring the sewer to them. So developers are looking at land, they're looking to close proximity to those Wausau. The Wausau lines are already laid down, so it kind of says that this is where they're gonna try to develop. Because the less money they gotta spend
Yeah.
getting that infrastructure. But the thing is, then the town's gotta accept that infrastructure.
Right.
What's the cost to maintain? The farther away you are, the more pipe you just took on.
Right.
That's downside. And that's what council has to look at. What's it costing us to keep this? Is it worth?
right,
Yeah, not to mention the sewer allocation policy that we are now in, because there is a constraint on the capacity. And so we have to be, careful about that.
That's good.
And I just want to point out, we do have a council representative who attends all of our planning and zoning meetings, so he also shares the comments and concerns of the planning and zoning board with the fellow council members.
Any other questions? All right, with that, if there are no other comments or questions, entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye.